"Who are you to sit in the front row?" A young father in an expensive suit pointed at the elderly man wearing a faded gray shirt, his hair neatly trimmed military style. The old man remained silent. Nobody knew who he was, until a man in Navy SEAL dress uniform walked in, looked at him, froze, and whispered with a trembling voice, "Commander Raven." "Sir?" Everything changed in that moment. The elderly man's name is Charles Raven McAdams, and he's 81 years old. He lives completely alone in a modest suburban home outside San Diego, California, with no wife, no children, and no one who knows anything about his mysterious past. Charles is thin and slightly stooped, wearing worn shoes with scuffed heels, but every movement he makes is precise, disciplined, and impeccably clean. Today, he's attending the graduation ceremony of Connor Lewis, the grandson of a dear friend who died serving overseas, attending as he promised his fallen comrade he would. The ceremony is being held at a prestigious civilian military academy, filled with wealthy parents, decorated generals, and influential political figures. Charles arrived early and quietly chose a seat in the front row, wanting to have a clear view when Connor received his diploma. Several well-dressed parents immediately noticed him and began exchanging uncomfortable glances, assuming he was someone who had wandered into the wrong section. A young father wearing an expensive Armani suit turned around and looked at Charles with obvious disdain. "Excuse me, sir. These front row seats are reserved for VIP guests and major donors only." Charles replied gently, "I just want to watch the ceremony. I promised someone I'd be here." The man's voice became more condescending. "Well then, you should move to the back section where you belong. Don't ruin the appearance of this important event." Charles said nothing in response. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't explain his connection to Connor or his military background. He simply sat quietly, his eyes focused on the stage where young graduates were preparing to receive their commissions. But what these judgmental parents didn't know was that Charles McAdams had once been one of the most decorated and feared special operations commanders in United States military history. During his 30-year career, he had led classified missions behind enemy lines, trained elite soldiers who would go on to become legends themselves, and earn the respect of every special forces unit in the American military. His code name, Raven, was whispered with reverence in military circles, spoken only by those who had earned the right to know his true identity. But Charles had never worn his medals in public, never spoken about his service, and never sought recognition for the sacrifices he had made for his country. He was perfectly content to remain anonymous, invisible, just another elderly man that society overlooks and dismisses. CTA Comment Act 1. Have you ever seen someone judged simply because others didn't know their true worth? Type. Appearances deceive. A ceremony coordinator approached Charles and spoke with bureaucratic authority. "Sir, we need you to move from the front row immediately. These seats are reserved for distinguished guests only." Charles stood up slowly, without saying a word, and quietly walked toward the back of the auditorium. He didn't complain or argue with the staff. He simply accepted their judgment and found an empty seat in the rear section, far from the stage. On the platform, the master of ceremonies began reading the names of outstanding graduates who had achieved special recognition during their training. When he reached Connor Lewis, fourth in his class, the announcer's voice carried a note of pride. Cadet Lewis achieved the highest marksmanship scores in Academy history, trained by someone he simply calls Grandpa. Connor stepped up to the podium to deliver his valedictorian speech, but when he reached the microphone, he paused and looked out at the audience. "I'm not going to give the speech I prepared today because the person I most wanted to honor has just been asked to leave the front row." The auditorium fell silent as Connor continued. "His name is Charles McAdams, but in my father's unit and in special operations circles, they called him Raven." Murmurs began rippling through the crowd as people tried to process what they were hearing. A man in Navy SEAL dress uniform suddenly stood up from his seat in the middle section, clearly recognizing the name that Connor had just spoken. He began scanning the auditorium, searching for someone he had only heard about in legendary stories told in classified briefings. When his eyes found Charles sitting quietly in the back row, the SEAL's entire demeanor changed. He walked purposefully through the seated crowd, approached Charles with the kind of respect reserved for the highest military authority, stood at perfect attention, and whispered, "Commander Raven, sir, is it really you?" The entire auditorium went completely silent. A woman sitting nearby whispered to her husband, "Commander Raven? Are they talking about Operation Omega?" The Navy SEAL immediately turned to face the stage and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, whoever invited this man to today's ceremony has invited a living legend." Other military personnel in the audience began standing, recognizing the significance of what was happening. An older veteran called out, "I served under Raven in Iraq. He saved my entire unit." Another voice joined in, "Operation Ghost Hill. He led that mission." More people began standing as they realized they were in the presence of someone whose reputation had reached mythical status in military communities. Charles remained seated, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden attention, but unable to escape the recognition that was spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Connor stepped away from the microphone and walked directly to Charles, helping him stand and guiding him toward the front of the auditorium. "Sir, this ceremony belongs to you as much as it belongs to any of us," Connor said with deep emotion. The transformation in the room was immediate and dramatic. People who had been dismissing Charles minutes earlier were now standing in respectful silence, finally understanding who had been sitting among them. CTA Comment Act 2. Do you believe that true greatness often hides in plain sight? Type. Legends walk among us. Every eye in the auditorium turned toward Charles as the full weight of his identity became clear. The ceremony coordinator who had asked him to move immediately approached, this time with deep respect and obvious embarrassment. "Sir, please, allow us to escort you to the seat of honor where you belong." Connor took Charles's arm and led him to the center of the stage where he handed him the microphone. Charles accepted it with trembling hands, but his eyes suddenly blazed with the fire that had once made him legendary among Special Forces operators. "I served for 30 years in units that had no official names, in places that don't appear on any maps. We didn't fight for medals or recognition. We fought to bring each other home. I don't wear ribbons or display commendations, but I keep promises. I promised Connor's father, who died serving in Afghanistan, that if he couldn't be here today, I would represent our family." A man in the audience suddenly stood up. "Sir, I was in Iraq in 2003. You saved my convoy when we were ambushed near Fallujah." Another veteran called out, "Operation Ghost Hill. You led us through impossible odds and brought everyone home." More people began standing throughout the auditorium. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Delta Force operators, Marines, all recognizing the man they had heard about in hushed conversations but never expected to meet. A 3-star general rose from the VIP section and walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm suspending today's planned program to honor someone who truly deserves our recognition." The general turned to Charles and removed his own medal from his dress uniform. "Sir, I've been wearing this, but you're the one who earned it. Everything I accomplished in my career was built on foundations that you laid." The auditorium erupted in sustained applause that lasted for several minutes. The young father who had originally demanded Charles move to the back sat with his head bowed, his face red with shame and embarrassment. Connor embraced Charles in front of the entire audience. "Today was supposed to be my graduation, but you're the one who makes me proudest to wear this uniform." Charles's voice broke with emotion as he spoke into the microphone. "I never needed recognition for what I did, but standing here today, seeing young people like Connor committed to serving others, reminds me why every mission was worth it. The greatest honor any soldier can receive isn't a medal or a ceremony. It's knowing that the next generation will carry forward the values we fought to protect." The Navy SEAL who had first recognized Charles approached the stage. "Sir, there are men and women serving around the world right now, using tactics you developed, following principles you taught. Your legacy lives in every successful mission." Military personnel throughout the audience began removing their own medals and ribbons, placing them on the stage in tribute to Charles, creating a visual display of respect that transcended rank and service branch. The academy superintendent took the microphone. From this day forward, this institution will establish the Charles Raven McAdams Chair of Leadership, ensuring that future generations of officers will learn from your example. Charles looked out at the sea of faces, many of them young people who would soon serve in dangerous places around the world, carrying forward traditions that he had helped establish. The only thing I want you to remember about today is that real honor doesn't announce itself. It serves quietly, leads by example, and measures success by the safety of others. As the ceremony concluded, hundreds of people approached Charles, not seeking autographs or photos, but simply wanting to shake the hand of someone whose reputation had inspired them throughout their own military careers. The young father who had dismissed Charles waited until the crowd thinned, then approached with genuine humility. "Sir, I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing who you were, and I hope my son grows up to show the respect you deserve." CTA Common Act 3. Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth completely transformed a room? Type, "Respect is earned in silence." Video footage of the ceremony spread rapidly across social media platforms within hours, capturing the moment when an anonymous elderly man was revealed to be a military legend. The story of the unknown Raven touched millions of people, sparking conversations about how society treats its unrecognized heroes. Major news outlets picked up the story with headlines reading, "Not everyone who wears medals is a hero. Some heroes wear nothing at all, but entire military units stand up for them." The Pentagon sent representatives to visit Charles at his modest home, inviting him to Washington, D.C. for official recognition of his decades of classified service. The military academy established the Raven Legacy Scholarship for children and grandchildren of Special Operations veterans, ensuring that their families would receive educational opportunities. The young father who had originally dismissed Charles issued a public apology on social media. "I was wrong to judge someone by their appearance. I hope my children grow up learning to show respect before they know someone's title or achievements." Charles continued living in his small house, but his daily routine changed dramatically as letters, flowers, and visitors arrived constantly, all wanting to express gratitude for his service. Veterans from across the country made pilgrimages to meet him, sharing stories of how his training methods or leadership principles had saved their lives in combat situations. One letter particularly moved Charles, written by a young Marine serving in Afghanistan. "Sir, my commanding officer trained under you in the 1990s. Every day, he teaches us lessons you taught him. You're still saving lives, even from your retirement." Local businesses in Charles's neighborhood began offering him free services, but he politely declined most offers, preferring to maintain his quiet independence. The academy where Connor graduated renamed their leadership building McAdams Hall, with a plaque reading, "In honor of those who serve without recognition." Connor visited Charles regularly, bringing updates about his own military training and career progress, ensuring that the promise Charles had made to Connor's father continued to be fulfilled. 6 months after the ceremony, Charles received a personal letter from the President of the United States. "Your lifetime of service reminds our nation that the greatest heroes often work in shadows, protecting freedoms that most people take for granted." But Charles remained humble throughout all the recognition, always redirecting attention to active duty service members and other veterans who were still fighting for their country. CTA Comment Act 4. Do you think the most deserving people are often the ones who seek recognition the least? Type, "Quiet strength inspires." We often honor people who wear medals and carry impressive titles, but sometimes the most deserving person in the room carries nothing except memories and promises kept. Charles McAdams never needed to be recognized or celebrated. He just needed to keep his word, to stand in the right place, at the right time, for the right reasons. And it was precisely that silence, that humility, that made an entire generation of warriors stand up in respect. Charles's story teaches us that true leadership doesn't demand attention. It serves quietly, influences others through example, and measures success by the achievements of those who follow. The most powerful people are often the ones who use their power to lift others up, rather than to elevate themselves. And the greatest honor any of us can receive isn't recognition for what we've accomplished, but knowing that our actions inspired others to serve with the same dedication and integrity. Heroes don't always wear uniforms or display their achievements. Sometimes they just show up, keep their promises, and remind us what honor really looks like. Final video comment. If you've ever known a silent hero, leave a word of thanks. Type, "I will always remember Raven."